Welcome back to yet another episode of Close to Broke. I've got the puppies to get the likes. That's the point. Today's video, we have a goal. 250 likes. If you guys can somehow get us to that, I'd be so thankful and so grateful. It'd mean the world to me if you guys supported the channel in that fashion. If you guys haven't already, make sure to click the subscribe button. But enough of that. Today is by far the best video we've ever put out on this channel, and I mean that with every bone in my body. We play some of the biggest stakes we've ever played in our entire poker career. 10-20 uncapped, the biggest game of our poker career. We're in for heaps. $5,000 buy-in. Insane fun. I hope you guys enjoy the video, and until the next one, enjoy. Alright, y'all, so just pulled up to the Commerce Casino, again with our co-pilot BJ.
What's up?
Ooh, close to Rook, let them know. BJ, what are you playing today?
I'm going to be playing the 5-5, 500 max, 300 minimum. Haven't taken this shot in a while, so it should be good. I just lost $400 at the bike.
You lost 400?
Yeah.
I thought you were down 150.
No, I lost another like 250.
Ooh.
So we're looking to double up. Let's get aces one time and we double up.
That's it, then we go home. I'm currently, I don't know, I might play the 5-10, I might play the 10-20. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. There's some games to be had. Nonetheless, we're gonna definitely check in with you guys in a bit. Until then, let's hop in. From the get-go, and I mean like from the get-go, very first hand in, the fireworks are already erupting. Cutoff opens to $60. We're 5-handed at this point, and he's playing like 15k effective. I'm in the small blind, and I look down at pocket kings. At this point, you know, you like building pots here. I'm $5,000 effective at this point. I go and make it $300. It folds back to the cutoff, who decides on a call. The flop is queen 5-6 with a 5-6 of diamonds. I go and decide to bet 30% here. Looking back, I think considering how dynamic this board texture is, with every possible top pair totally being in his open initial raising and then calling a 3-bet. I think with the obvious straight draws and flush draws, I think betting at 70 to 75% is just ideal in this situation. But nonetheless, that is what we bet, 30%. It's my first hand, so give me a break. He thinks it over for a little bit and decides on a raise. He raises to $675. At this point, the pot's getting fairly big pretty rapidly. I think we're in around $1,100-ish. I think about it for quite a bit of time, and I'm just going back and forth in my head as to how many times is he gonna have a combo draw, what is my percentage against what I think his perceived range to be, and obviously how am I doing against his range. All things considered, his range is gonna be fairly strong here. I think he'll have a lot of top pairs as mentioned. I think he can easily have a lot of pairs just in general here. Ace-5 suited, all the wheel aces. You'll have a lot of suited gappers. You'll have a ton of suited connectors. So with all that being considered, I don't think he's just waited to like flopping sets. I think in a lot of instances, he's gonna have some equity in the pot. And I think the most important thing to do against somebody whose range I believe is condensed to a lot of equity is gonna be to get as much money as I can in the middle and give him the wrong price to draw. And I go ahead and do just that. I actually raise 3-bet on the flop to $1,700. Again, I think this is like egregiously too big. I played the whole hand kind of weird, but it is what it is. I think, again, going back, I'd go around that 1,400-ish, like 1,400 to 1,600-ish. I think in my head, all I could think about was I wanted to go slightly under 3x. And that doesn't make too much sense. Obviously, I'm giving him a bad price to call, and if he's willing to call off if he's willing to get it all in here with the combo draw, then that's fine. I'm not doing too great against that range. I don't know. They probably have like 40% with that hand. So, nonetheless, he ends up thinking about it for a bit and deciding on a fold. At this point, we're playing 4-handed. One of the people has stepped away from the table. The button decides to limp here. I'm in small blind, look down at king, queen of diamonds. I go ahead and isolate to $100. The big blind thinks about it for a little bit, decides on a fold, gets back to our friend on the button, he decides to make the call. The flop is 9-9 deuce with 1 diamond, so we flop a backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw, and 2 overs. Besides that, in reality, we just have king high here. I go ahead and bet $80 as a continuation bet. I'd probably do this for my entire range, I believe, here on such a dry board texture. And he thinks about it for a little bit and decides on a call. The turn is the 10 of clubs, so one of the decent cards for us. Again, it'll definitely help our isolation range. I think we can easily have Jack 10 suited here, Queen 10 suited, King 10 suited, Ace 10 suited. All those hands are definitely going to be in our isolation range here. Not only that, for our hands for bluffs, I really like having King Jack, Queen Jack, and King Queen in this situation where we just turn some outs with the straight possibilities. So I decide at this point it's time to ramp up the pressure and bet near pot. And that's kind of what's in, by the way, right now, which is like the 30%, the down bet on the flop, and then like bombing the turn. So we go and do just that. We bet $350 with our gut shot and 2 overs. And he thinks about it for a little bit of time and decides to make the call once again. The river comes the 4 of diamonds. Again, the action is on me, and I think about it for a bit. I think at this point, the only hand that I can have here that makes sense, obviously what I'm blocking here is like queens. Queens, kings, and aces, I think, are all going to go for 3 streets of value in this instance on a fairly dry board texture. At this point, I'm putting him on a marginal holding, some kind of like middling pair. Pretty much that's it. I mean, to call in such a dry, board texture, I think 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, 5s, 6s, 7s are all in his range, definitely, as well as 8s. I think it goes without being said that middling pairs is what is going to be the most prominent hands that are going to be in his range at the moment. And if I'm targeting that range, I think I'm going to not go for such a huge sizing. I think anywhere from 50 to 70% is optimal. And I go ahead and bet just that. I bet $700 as a bluff, obviously here representing queens, kings, and aces. He thinks about it for quite some time. And I mean quite some time. After quite a bit of time, he decides on a call. Calls me down and shows pocket fives. He completely read me, owned my soul. Tough bluff here. I mean, I think any other river, I pretty much... Any face card I win on, so like a jack, queen, king, ace, all those rivers I bet, and he probably folds. Unfortunate that river came. Maybe just goes to show that I don't have to bluff all the time, which I'm sure that's a leak in my game. So yeah, unfortunate, but we're on to the next hand. A couple hands later, we're in the same situation, playing with the same player. He goes ahead and limps once again from under the gun. I'm next to act, and we're 5-handed at this point. I look down at ace-8 offsuit, and the table's been playing fairly passive. Nobody's been really attacking besides myself at this point. There's quite a few juicy spots at the table, so obviously I'm here to mix it up. I'd like to isolate with this gentleman here. It folds back to him, and he makes the call. The flop is ace-8-4 rainbow, so what could be definitely perceived as a pretty shitty wide isolation. 5-handed I think is acceptable at the very least. And we get rewarded with quite the flop. He checks to me, and I'm going to play pretty much identical to what I did last time. I want to go ahead and bet 30% pot here. Again, I'd be probably betting my entire range here. Anything that contains an ace, all my king highs, probably like half my queen highs, and all of my backdoor value hands. So suited connectors in this situation, I'm going to be betting all those hands. And especially when we flop top 2 pair, we want to keep them in, right? We're not afraid of too many runouts. So we do just that, betting $80 once again. He thinks about it for a little bit of time and decides to make the call. The turn is a 3 of diamonds. So the board runs out with the complete rainbow situation here. He goes ahead and checks it one more time to me. And as I mentioned before, on a turn card like this, where not many hands improve, I feel like if he's calling the flop, he's most likely going to call in the turn, unless he has a hand that's fairly weak, like bottom pair or, like third pair. So I go ahead and size up here once again. So I bet near pot, $350 on the turn, and he thinks about it for a little bit, and he makes a call. The river is a jack of spades, so kind of an interesting card. At face value, you might think like, oh, this, like all the straight draws break out, everything breaks out. What's the difference? This is an interesting card in a lot of ways because his sticky holdings that'll be like jack 8 suited, which again in a game like this is very, very likely to be had. We're short-handed. You should have seen the hands people were raising with. Ace jack is something that I don't think he really has too often, but maybe he's limping ace jack. The thing that I'm hoping for, and I don't know if any of his hands improved to 2 pairs besides jack 8. So keeping with the tradition, I want to bomb this river, and I want to bomb it big. I bet $1,000 on this river after he checks it to me. He tanks for what seems like an eternity, and a bunch of time goes by, and he decides on a fold. It's unfortunate he didn't call. Maybe my sizing was a little too big. I think maybe that $700 price point would have been a little better for him. Maybe more likely to call, but it's always painful when somebody tank folds when you have a value hand and you bet big, because then you think that, maybe I should have bet a little smaller, he would have called. But nonetheless, happy with the play at the end of the day.
As you guys have seen thus far, it has been an insane session. There's not many places to do like mid-session updates, so this is my best bet here. It's pretty bonkers, as you guys can see. The most insane hands I've played, we're playing 10-20, we're short-handed. I don't know if I'm mentally prepared for all this, but we're here nonetheless. It's becoming a fun game. We have like one like action player at the table. For the rest of it, it's just, you know, pros or whatever. So we'll see how we do. Phone's about to die.
The next hand of note we have here for you, under the gun opens is $70. The cutoff, myself on the button, the small blind and the big blind all make the call. We're going family style to the flop here. We are 5-handed and we're all going to the flop. I have queen 10 of hearts. The flop comes 2, 3, 4 with 1 heart. It checks to me on the button, and I don't think we have many reason to bet, so we decide to check back. The turn is a juicy one. It's the queen of diamonds. It checks again to me. I think the only reason I even put this hand in the notes is because there's one thing to note here, is although I'm super against playing trappy McTraps or poker, it just does not work often enough. And it's important to build pots when we have big hands. Having a hand like this in our check back range on the turn is pivotal, meaning that it's less likely for an opponent to just bomb bluff us on the river because our hands aren't just weighted to like middling pairs. So I decide to check here on the turn just for that reason. And on the river, the big blind decides to lead out for $150. It gets to me. Obviously, I have a snap call, and he shows king 5 offsuit for the flopped open-ender and completely break out on both the turn and river. Again, super shorthand. It is important to mention that what you want to take away from this is understanding that you want to have some good checkbacks on turns, especially when you've seen some lack of interest in the pot. One, because maybe you can manufacture a bigger pot. Obviously, that, you know, gentleman bluffed that on the river because nobody seemed interested in it. But the other big thing is that you want to have some strong hands when you get to the river to call down what could be a pretty big bet. Moving along, under the gun decides to open to $60. Folds to the small blind. We're 5-handed at this point. He decides to make the call. I'm in the big blind with 9-6 of diamonds, and I don't think I'm going anywhere either, so I make the call. The flop is absolute gin. 9-6-3 rainbow if it wasn't already good enough. The small blind and myself check to the under the gun initial raiser, who bets $120 here. The small blind makes the call, and the action is now on me. There's obviously only two answers to this equation, and that's either calling or raising. I think if the small blind folded, I would have been okay with just calling, but because he did make the call and there's multiple players in this pot, I think at this point it's time that we start raising up the monies. Getting more money in the middle. They can definitely be on some big draws, and it's important that we tax those draws, especially when we have such a strong holding. There's so many action-killing runouts that can put us in a pretty bad situation. So after a bit of thinking, I make it $360. To my surprise, both players make the call. Was not expecting that whatsoever, but nonetheless, they did. The turn is a jack of clubs, so now the backdoor flush draw comes there as well as a picture card. The small blind decides to check. It gets onto me, and at this point, I'm just considering my options. How much do I want to bet? What sizing am I going for? And it's important in this situation that I think we size up and get around that 65 to 75% pot sized bet. I go ahead and make it $700, and it gets back to the initial raiser, who tanks for quite a bit of time and makes the fold. The small blind player gets back to him, and he is also tanking now. At this point, I'm putting him on a range that includes mostly open-enders. A lot of suited connectors will be in his range, as well as some pairs in this situation, obviously. After quite a bit of thinking, he decides to go and fold his hand. He later told me that he did fold top pair, or excuse me, he did fold a pair of nines. So, happy with my understanding of the hand. Unfortunate that they both decided to fold. I guess it wasn't as scary as a turn card for me as it was for them, so nonetheless, happy to take down yet another huge pot. Quite a couple of hours have gone by, and what I will say is that at this point, our stack has gone down to around $5,000, so what we bought in for our initial investment. Although we've been winning a lot of pots, none of them have gone to showdown, and none of them have gone too insanely big, like nothing. There's been no huge 10K pots, you know what I mean? Which is very likely since I had like 6 or 7K and I was the shortest stack at the table because it was an uncapped game. All that being said, why I'm bringing this up is A lot of pots where it was like me trying to call, I have second pair or top pair, and we were just slightly outkicked, or the draws got there, stuff like that. Nothing too crazy, nothing too interesting, just like double barreling, me having to give up, or me having to call two bets and folding on a river, stuff like that. So that's why we're at the stack route now before this hand happens. The Action Jackson table has now broken, it's hit a new level. There's a reg that's completely off his horse. He's completely on planet Mars or something. And the action player that has come and completely changed the dynamics of the table is just here to have a good time. He's played, I'm not exaggerating, probably 19 out of the last 20 hands. And he's here to have a good time. He's a fun player. And that's exactly why we're here. He decides to open to $60 from the middle position. We're six-handed at this point. I look down at pocket jacks from the button. I don't think there's any situation here in the world besides 3-betting. I go ahead and do just that. It gets back to him, and he thinks about it for a little while and calls. The flop is absolute dumpster fire. Ace, Queen 3, Rainbow. And to make it worse, the middle position player makes it $400. My hand is just caught in the cookie jar, I guess. I'm upset. I'm tilted. I've been losing a bunch of small pots that are adding up. And I make... In my head at the time, I'm saying like, dude, this guy can just be bluffing. He can have so much trash. He's played like 19 out of 20 hands, and I'm not exaggerating. He's donk-led probably 12 of them. Like, what seems like an excessive amount. Like donk leading just in his strategy or whatever. And I think after that, I talked myself into making a pretty bad call. The turn comes the 5 of diamonds. So now we have a backdoor diamond draw on the board. He goes ahead and checks, though, and that's pretty surprising to me. I'd expect him to kind of get it back into aggression mode, but obviously I'm happy to take a free river here. I go ahead and check back. The river is another 5, so pairing the board, and once again he checks. At this point, I'm in the sense where it's like either he's absolutely bluffing and he's full of shit, or he has a hand like Queen Jack or King Queen. The question is, can I make an action player fold a pair? That is the question. And after quite a bit of thinking, I think that if I make a pretty sizable river bet here, he will have to at least consider it, right? I don't think in any realm he can have an ace here. I don't know, just the way he's been betting, the hands he's been showing down, I wish I could describe it better for you guys, but I'd bet a lot of money that didn't have top pair. And if that's the case, I want to go out swinging. Is what I want to do. So I do just that. I actually bet $1,000 on this river. Huge river bet. It's a huge bluff. It's a huge portion of my stack, like I said. And he pretty quickly decides to fold. I could not believe it. My terrible, terrible play. Completely fallen victim to the situation and my emotions. But luckily, I guess you cannot ever doubt the heart in this kid. And I go ahead and bomb the river and it works out for me. Super happy, you know. How can you complain about that? So the action player in this next hand is involved once again. He's under the gun, decides to limp. Like I said, he's played nearly every single pot since he sat at the table. I look down at 8-6 of diamonds, and I'm on the button. Although I do like isolating here, I actually don't do that. I just make the call. The small blind, who's a decent reg, decides to isolate himself, though, making it $120. The action player, as we all know, we could have, bet $1 million on it, decides to make the call. It gets back to me, and I do just that as well. The flop comes 9-7 deuce with 2 hearts. The action checks to me surprisingly, and on this board texture, it definitely favors my range as the player on the button that just decided to limp. So I go ahead and bet $160. The small blind decides to make the call, which is a good reg, and the action player decides to make the fold. The turn comes yet another deuce. At this point, what you have to understand, and I definitely understand and didn't want to listen to myself, it is a terrible idea to bluff on board pairing cards on the turn. Usually never leads to folds from the opposition, especially when you're bluffing, it feels like. Not the greatest idea, and definitely theoretically not the best play. After he checks to me, I take none of that into consideration, it seems like, and I freaking bomb the shit out of this pot. I bet $600. I think at this point, it's about time that I start representing hands like, boats at this point. But I'm not really repping too much, to be fair. It's kind of a pretty crappy played hand. Hands for bluffs here are going to be obviously what I have now. Flush draws, straight draws. Those are pretty much going to be my range. My range will be flush, straight, and some sets. So quite a few bluffs in my range, to be fair. And it sucks that I'm bluffing with this hand. But anyways, I do this stat, and he decides to make the call. The river is the 4 of hearts. What can seem like a pretty interesting card. Obviously, the front door flush gets there. He checks to me. I'm at a crossroads again. I mean, do I want to bluff? And if I bluff, I'm going to have to bomb this thing, right? I'm going to have to go huge. And if I don't want to bluff, I'm just never going to win with 8 high. This is the worst hand I'm going to end up with in this situation. So, as a lot of people know, you usually tend to bet when it's the worst hand in your range. And I go ahead and do just that. And I go for $1,200. Yes, $1,200 bet. And my reasoning is that for a lot of the bluffs that I contain on this river, I do improve. So all of my nut flush draws that I decide to bomb the turn to get folds, I'm going to bomb. And then in the instance where I have full houses, this is not really a scary card for me because I want them to call, right? So with all that being considered is why I decided to bomb this river. Again, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm sure in a lot of ways I'm right. I'm wrong. It is this play. I will die on the sword if I have to. I bet huge here, like I said, $1,200 to go. It gets over to him, and he thinks about it for a little bit of time and decides to make the fold. I mean, hallelujah. I don't know what else to say. Amen. I'm very lucky. What felt like a fairly poorly played session, just some huge bluffs to bail me out late. I'm really happy that obviously I won some money. A little bit to learn from this vlog. I hope that you guys got a little bit from it. And yeah, pretty insane couple of runouts. I will say that. The one other thing I'll definitely mention is that I felt like today I just was not able to catch a break. Although it could seem like I'm running well because I won money, right? I had to manufacture a ton of pots. There was just not a lot of times where I was just flopping huge hands and holding, or there was a lot of spots where I was unable to cash in on the opportunity of flopping a huge draw and getting there. So to even leave up in this game, I feel super happy. I feel super grateful. I'm happy. The ability to make up for really poor played poker is something that maybe I'm a little better at than not better at. But what I will not and cannot excuse is the fact that there was quite a bit of poor play in this session. But what I will say is that my poor play was luckily bailed out by some pretty decent river bets, river bluffs for that matter. So pretty incredible session. I was in for $5,000 and I was out for just shy of $7,000, $69.80 something or something like that. And yeah, we can't complain too very much. Well. Probably the most entertaining session we've had on the vlog so far. So happy to put an awesome stamp on episode 14. At least for myself, ended up being pretty well. Huge stakes, obviously bigger than we were expecting to play today. Luckily we came rolled up, ready to go. Anyways, BJ, how'd you do?
I lost 25 bucks, got into it with a reg, met a guy who was a bookie who brought a girl who was first time playing, stuff like that. So, you know, the regular low stakes type shit.
The cool thing about that whole experience is that like we pretty much saw the in real life Jersey Shore. But nonetheless, crazy session for myself. I was in for $5,000 and out for just shy of $7K. So a $2,000 win. Not the biggest score I've had, but definitely was a ton of fun to play it. It was just frustrating. I feel like I couldn't connect with the flop, as you guys saw. I couldn't like really drill some really premium value hands. And felt like I had to, like you say, manifest hands and manufacture pots, which sometimes happens in this game. So pretty awesome session. I can't complain too much. And at this point, I'm just excited to get another win. That's 2 back-to-back wins. And yeah, we'll see you guys, I think hopefully soon. Until